They mocked her, interrupted her, and tried to ruin her reputation. Now they're the ones begging for forgiveness. Karoline Leavitt had faced tough interviews before. She wasn't new to pushback, especially from liberal media, but this time was different. This wasn't just political sparring or a heated exchange, it was a direct, calculated attack. She had been invited onto the talk show under the premise of discussing policy. That's how they framed it. But the moment she took her seat, she sensed the energy shift. The tension in the room wasn't the usual back and forth of differing opinions. It felt like an ambush. The first few questions were standard, predictable. Even then, without warning, one of the hosts leaned forward, voice laced with something sharper than skepticism. "Let's be real, Karoline. You're not here because of your qualifications. You're here because you're obedient. That's why you got the job, isn't it?" The audience reacted instantly. Gasps, murmurs, a few stifled laughs. Karoline's expression didn't change, but inside she felt the shift. This wasn't an interview anymore, it was a performance, and she was the target. She took a breath, steady and measured. She wasn't going to lose her cool. "That's what they wanted. I'm here because I've earned my place. And if you disagree, let's talk policy. Not personal attacks, but they didn't want policy. They wanted a reaction." One of the other hosts smirked, eyes scanning the crowd before delivering the next blow, earned or handed, because from where we're sitting, it looks like loyalty is the only real credential these days. This time the audience clapped. Karoline knew exactly what was happening. The segment had been planned, the lines rehearsed. The goal wasn't a debate, it was humiliation. The next few minutes were a blur of interruptions, dismissive laughs, and leading questions designed to make her look foolish no matter what she said. It was twisted, reframed, or ignored entirely. The show wasn't about conversation. It was about control. But Karoline didn't crumble. She held her ground, fired back with facts, and refused to let them push her into an emotional outburst. Then, just as the segment was wrapping up, the host doubled down. "Women like you set us back. You're a tool. And deep down, you know it's silence." Even the audience didn't know how to react to that one. Karoline's jaw clenched, not out of anger, out of something deeper. A realization they weren't attacking her because they believed what they were saying. They were attacking her because they were threatened. She smiled, slow and deliberate. "If standing up for my beliefs makes me a pawn, then so be it. But at least..."
"I'm not a marionette." The segment ended, the cameras cut. The damage was done. Or so they thought, but they underestimated one thing: the reaction that was coming next. The clip hit the internet like wildfire within hours. It was everywhere. Twitter, YouTube. Every conservative news outlet at first. The network tried to control the narrative. They clipped the segment, framed it as just another heated debate, and pushed their usual agenda. But that wasn't enough to bury what had happened, because the full unedited version was out. And it painted a very different picture. Conservatives weren't just angry, they were furious. Comment sections flooded with accusations of media bias, double standards, and outright bullying. Even those who weren't die-hard supporters of Karoline couldn't deny what they had seen. They hadn't debated her. They had attacked her. Hashtags exploded. Hashtags die media bias hard. Stand with Karoline. Cancel the show. Republican politicians chimed in. Conservative commentators dissected the exchange frame by frame. Even some liberals, uncomfortable with how far the host had gone, admitted it was a bad look. But it didn't stop there. The show sponsors started getting tagged. Viewers weren't just mad, they were strategic. They flooded advertisers with messages asking why they were backing a platform that openly disrespected women who didn't fall in line with their politics. Some companies tried to ignore it. Others released generic statements. But then, one of the biggest sponsors pulled out. Their statement was carefully worded, avoiding controversy, while making it obvious they didn't want to be associated with divisive and unprofessional discourse. That was the first domino. The rest followed fast. The network scrambled. Damage control mode. Anonymous sources leaked reports of panic behind. But for targeted harassment, professional damage, and possibly even coordinated media manipulation. The network had faced backlash before. They had weathered controversies. But this was different. Karoline sat in a dimly lit office in Washington, D.C., across from her legal team. Stacks of files lay on the table, some still warm from the printer. The stakes were clear. This wasn't just about a viral moment or political debate. This was about accountability, a senior attorney. A no-nonsense woman with years of media litigation experience set her pen down and leaned back. The defamation angle is strong, but we can also argue professional harm. This wasn't just criticism. It was an orchestrated attempt to sabotage you. Karoline listened carefully. She wasn't the type to jump straight into legal battles, but this was different. This was about her career. This was about a precedent. The more they dug, the worse it got. Internal emails surfaced, leaked messages between producers and staff, hinting that the segment had been pre-planned as an exposure piece, not a genuine interview. One line in particular stood out. Make sure she stumbles, cut her off. If she gets too comfortable, that wasn't journalism, that was an attack. By the next morning, news broke Karoline Leavitt was officially pursuing legal action. The network's response was immediate and frantic. Their lawyers rushed to issue statements, calling the lawsuit frivolous and a desperate political stunt. But the damage was already escalating. The lawsuit wasn't just about Karoline anymore. It was about media ethics, about how certain voices were treated on national platforms. The backlash deepened. More advertisers backed out. The show's ratings took a hit. Viewers on both sides of the aisle started asking the same question. If they had nothing to hide, why were they panicking? Then something unexpected happened. A former producer came forward anonymously at first, then publicly in an exclusive interview. She admitted what many had suspected. The show had a history of coordinating attacks against conservative guest producers, were instructed to push them into uncomfortable moments, cut them off, mock them subtly, and control the narrative. She provided emails, memos, and even unedited footage from past interviews, clips. It made it clear what happened to Karoline wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. Suddenly, this wasn't just a lawsuit. It was an expose, and the network, they were running out of ways to contain it. Inside the network's headquarters, the atmosphere was suffocating. Executives barked orders, legal teams huddled over conference tables, and PR specialists scrambled to craft the perfect damage control statement. They had dealt with controversies before, but this wasn't just another bad press cycle. This was a full-scale disaster. The leaked emails, the former producer's testimony, the advertisers pulling out, and now Karoline's lawsuit was gaining momentum. The network released an official statement, but it fell flat. We stand by our commitment to free and open discussion. While we regret any misunderstanding, we maintain that our hosts acted within the bounds of spirited debate. It was a carefully worded non-apology, and it made things worse. Viewers saw right through it. By the next morning, the show's social media pages were in meltdown. Comments were turned off, dislikes skyrocketed. More advertisers severed ties, issuing vague statements about reassessing partnerships. The message was clear. Corporate sponsors didn't want the backlash. Then came the first major internal casualty. One of the show's lead producers resigned. The press release called it a mutual decision, but insiders leaked the truth. They were trying to contain the fire, but it was too late, because now the legal proceedings had officially begun. Karoline's team subpoenaed internal records, looking for more proof of coordinated media bias and targeted defamation, and what they found was worse than anyone anticipated. More emails, more memos, more undeniable proof that the network wasn't just reporting news. They were orchestrating it. And then the biggest bombshell. Yet a second former employee came forward. This time, it wasn't just about the talk show. It was about the entire network. They alleged that this wasn't an isolated incident, that certain guests were strategically discredited, shut down, and ridiculed to fit a pre-approved agenda. Suddenly, Karoline's case wasn't just about her. It was about the credibility of the entire media institution. And as the legal battle heated up, the network had to face a chilling truth. They weren't just fighting Karoline anymore. They were fighting the consequences. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every available seat, their cameras and notebooks ready to capture every detail. Outside the scene was even more intense. Protesters, supporters, media vans lined up for blocks. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It had become a cultural showdown. Karoline sat beside her attorneys, calm. but focused. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment. The network's legal team was formidable, but she knew they weren't just fighting her. They were fighting their own history. The trial began with opening arguments Karoline's lawyers laid it out plainly. This case isn't about political differences. It's about media accountability. Our client was targeted, discredited, and professionally harmed, not through honest journalism, but through calculated manipulation. Then came the evidence, the leaked emails, the producer's testimony, the unedited footage from previous interviews that showed a clear pattern of coordinated misconduct. Every piece tightened the noose around the network. Their defense team tried to argue that heated debate was normal, that Karoline was simply playing the martyr. But then the former producer took the stand. She testified under oath that producers were given pre-show instructions to ensure conservative guests never came out looking strong, and when she read one particular email out loud, the entire courtroom went silent. Do not let her finish full sentences. Keep control. Mock lightly, make her lose credibility. That single line shattered any illusion that the interview had been unbiased. The network's attorneys fought back, calling the show's format entertainment, not journalism. They argued that guests should expect tough questioning, but Karoline's attorneys countered with something even stronger: a video montage, a direct comparison of how liberal guests were treated versus how conservatives were treated. One side showed respectful interviews, uninterrupted responses, and softball questions. The other, constant interruptions, sarcasm, mockery, cheap shots disguised as debate. The jury watched in shock. The contrast was undeniable. Then came the financial records. Karoline's team presented data proving that her reputation had suffered measurable losses, speaking engagements canceled, opportunities withdrawn, a deliberate attempt to silence her. At that moment, the case shifted. This wasn't just a media controversy anymore. This was a turning point, and as closing arguments wrapped up, the jury had only one question to answer: did the network cross the line? The entire country waited for the verdict. The jury's decision came faster than expected. When the judge re-entered the courtroom, everyone held their breath. Karoline sat still, her hands folded in her lap. The network's legal team, once confident, now looked defeated. The four persons stood in a matter of defamation and professional harm. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff. Karoline Leavitt gasps, murmurs a few stunned expressions. Karoline closed her eyes for a brief moment, exhaling as the weight of the past few months finally lifted. The damages were significant: a multi-million-dollar payout, a public admission of wrongdoing. The network was forced to issue a formal statement, not just to Karoline, but to every guest who had been subjected to their bias. But the fallout didn't stop there. The show was officially shut down. The network framed it as a restructuring decision, but everyone knew the reality: advertisers weren't coming back. The brand was too damaged. More employees came forward. More unethical practices were revealed. This wasn't just a loss for the network. It was a turning point for political media. And Karoline, her career didn't just survive. It skyrocketed. She became a symbol of pushing back against media corruption. Book deals, speaking engagements, a stronger platform than ever. But she didn't use it to gloat. Instead, she left the public with this: it's not about silencing people you disagree with, it's about integrity. The media isn't supposed to manufacture reality. It's supposed to reflect it, and that was a message no one could dismiss if this story made you think. Share it. The conversation about media bias and accountability isn't over. Make sure your voice is amplified. Subscribe for more stories that challenge the status quo, because the truth, it always comes out.